9. Ignition sequence.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1, 0, and liftoff.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle earned its place in history and has come to a final stop.
Der niederländische Prinz Johan Frieso befindet sich nach seinem Lawinenunfall weiter in Lebensgefahr. Der 43-jährige Sohn von Königin Beatrix war gestern beim Skifahren am Arlberg in Österreich von einem Schneebrett verschüttet worden. Erst nach 20 Minuten hatten Helfer Johan Frieso bergen können. Heute besuchte fast das gesamte niederländische Königshaus den Schwerverletzten. Ines Barth, Corinna Hilz und Martin Eberl berichten.
An der Seite von Schwiegertochter Mabel besucht Königin Beatrix am Vormittag erneut ihren Sohn Prinz Johan Frieso auf der Intensivstation der Universitätsklinik Innsbruck. Der Zustand des 43-Jährigen ist unverändert, wurde heute mitgeteilt. Johan Frieso sei noch nicht außer Lebensgefahr, habe die Nacht aber ruhig und stabil verbracht. Auch sein Bruder Kronprinz Willem Alexander ist mit seiner Familie inzwischen angereist.
Wir danken für alle gute Wünsche, ja. Wünsche von allen Leuten.
Gestern Mittag war Prinz Johan Frieso mit einem befreundeten Hoteldirektor im Skigebiet Lech abseits der Piste unterwegs, als sich dieses 30 mal 50 Meter große Schneebrett löste und den Prinzen verschüttete. Wie schnell das gehen kann, zeigen diese Archivbilder aus der Helmkamera eines anderen Skifahrers. Er wurde nach 4 Minuten wieder befreit. Johan Frieso lag rund 20 Minuten unter der Schneedecke und musste wiederbelebt werden.
Er hatte wirklich Glück, es war ein Notarzthubschrauber da. Der Notarzt konnte sofort nach Freilegung mit seiner Versorgung beginnen.
Zum Zeitpunkt des Unglücks herrschte Lawinenwarnstufe 4, die zweithöchste Gefahrenstufe. Trotzdem fuhren der Prinz und sein Begleiter ins freie Gelände.
Man sieht hier, die Unglücksstelle liegt außerhalb der gesicherten Piste im freien Skiraum bei Lawinenwarnstufe 4. Das heißt, bei großer Lawinengefahr wird den Skifahrern dringend davon abgeraten, die Piste zu verlassen. Wer sich nicht daran hält, geht ein hohes Risiko ein.
Den Begleiter rettete ein solcher Rucksack mit Airbags aus der Lawine. Johan Frieso fuhr ohne diese Ausrüstung. Über die Überlebenschancen des 43-Jährigen können die Ärzte erst in einigen Tagen eine Prognose abgeben. Für die niederländische Königsfamilie beginnt ein banges Warten.
Der Iran hat seine Öllieferungen nach Großbritannien und Frankreich gestoppt. Das teilte ein Sprecher des Ölministeriums in Teheran mit. Im Atomstreit mit dem Iran hatte die EU im Januar ein Embargo für den Sommer beschlossen. Teheran hatte daraufhin angekündigt, dem Westen mit einem eigenen Exportstopp zuvorzukommen.
Er ist zwar noch nicht gewählt, aber er wird es wohl werden. Der frühere DDR-Bürgerrechtler und erste Bundesbeauftragte der Stasi-Unterlagenbehörde Joachim Gauck ist der gemeinsame Kandidat von Schwarz, Gelb, Rot und Grün für das Amt des Bundespräsidenten. Und damit ist ihm die Mehrheit der Stimmen in der Bundesversammlung sicher. Nach dramatischen Stunden der Entscheidung stand die gemeinsame Wahl dann am Abend fest. Carsten Behrendt hat sich umgehört, was der Mann und die Frau auf der Straße von Christian Wulffs Nachfolger im Schloss Bellevue denn halten.
Ich bin davon eigentlich sehr begeistert. Vor allen Dingen deshalb begeistert, dass sie sich endlich mal geeinigt haben. Also mir gefällt es sehr gut.
Was erwarten Sie von diesem Präsidenten?
Also ich erwarte zunächst mal, dass er einen guten Bundespräsidenten abgibt. Sein Vorgänger war ja nicht so erfolgreich und dass da dadurch ein bisschen endlich Ruhe in die Politik kommt.
Ich denke, das war eine Vernunftsentscheidung von der Kanzlerin.
Ich denke schon, dass er seinen eigenen Stil doch irgendwo bringen wird.
Das Ganze vielleicht nie so auf Glamour-Paar machen wird, sondern seinem Amt gerecht wird einfach. Ohne große Skandalschlagzeilen.
Wir sind begeistert davon, stimmen dem zu und freuen uns darüber.
Ich finde es eigentlich schade, dass wir immer noch einen Bundespräsidenten brauchen und man jetzt nicht mal nach einer Frau schaut. Wir haben ja auch eine Kanzlerin, warum nicht auch eine Präsidentin?
Das ist ja ein ehrlicher Mensch, der hat damals die Gauck-Behörde, hat das ja alles aufgeklärt und so weiter. Und dadurch entsteht ja auch Ehrlichkeit.
Ich glaube, er deckt halt die große Bevölkerung ab, also dass er halt neutral ist und keiner Partei irgendwie zugehörig ist.
Schon vor knapp 2 Jahren war er Kandidat für das höchste Amt im Staat. 3 Wahlgänge brauchte es damals, bis sich Christian Wulff schließlich gegen ihn durchsetzen konnte. Joachim Gauck. Die Demokratie hat er erst spät kennenlernen dürfen, aber er hat als Pfarrer und Bürgerrechtler in der DDR immer für sie gekämpft und als Leiter der Stasi-Unterlagenbehörde nach der Wende an der Aufarbeitung der ostdeutschen Vergangenheit entscheidend mitgewirkt. Seine Themen waren und sind Freiheit und Glück. Joachim Gauck gilt als konservativ und links zugleich, wortmächtig und hartnäckig, als Glücksfall für die Demokratie. Nur eines ist er sicher nicht, auch nicht als Bundespräsident, nämlich bequem. Ein Porträt von Melanie Haag.
Ja, wenn Leute finden, dass ich ein guter Bundespräsident bin, wissen Sie, das ist praktisch die ideale Situation. Besser wird es nie.
Joachim Gauck wird 1940 in Rostock geboren. Er studiert Theologie, wird evangelischer Pastor und stellt sich früh gegen das DDR-Regime. Das Gefühl, einem Unrechtsstaat ausgeliefert zu sein, prägt ihn. Freiheit wird sein Lebensthema. 1989 gründet Gauck mit das Neue Forum in Rostock. Ab 1990 leitet er für 10 Jahre die Stasi-Unterlagenbehörde. Auch heute ist sein Wort noch immer gefragt.
Unser Yes, we can heißt, wir sind das Volk. Wir haben es 89 gesprochen und wollen es niemals vergessen.
2010. Zu seinem 70. Geburtstag hält die Bundeskanzlerin die Festrede. Sie nennt Gauck einen Freiheitskämpfer, Einheitsstifter. Doch als kurz darauf ein Nachfolger für Bundespräsident Horst Köhler gesucht wird, will Merkel, Christian Wulff, einen aus ihrer Partei. Doch die Herzen der Deutschen schlagen für Gauck die denkbar knappe Niederlage. Er trägt sie mit Größe. Nun will auch die Kanzlerin Joachim Gauck. Und Deutschland wird einen Bundespräsidenten bekommen, der für alle da sein will. Als Linker, als Liberaler, als Konservativer und als Mann mit Bodenhaftung.
Hallo? Hallo? So, Lühe, was morgen wie nu?
Im Schloss Bellevue wird jetzt ein neues Kapitel deutscher Geschichte geschrieben. An Joachim Gauck ist es, die großen Erwartungen zu erfüllen.
Ich komme aus dem Flieger und war im Taxi, als die Frau Bundeskanzlerin mich erreicht hat. Und ich bin noch nicht mal gewaschen und bin also vor Ihnen. Und es schadet auch nichts, dass Sie sehen, dass ich überwältigt und auch ein wenig verwirrt bin. Aber eins weiß ich, dass die Nähe von Menschen, die Ja sagen zur Verantwortung, die es überall gibt in unserem Land, nicht nur auf der politischen Ebene, die wird meine Hauptaufgabe sein.
Nach einer ernsten Nacht hat er die Lacher zunächst mal auf seiner Seite. Ja, Deutschland sucht den Bundespräsidenten und dabei ist man schnell fündig geworden.
Und damit hallo und ganz herzlich willkommen zu unserem News-Spezial. Ja, nach Christian Wulffs Rücktritt am Freitag sollte es dann schnell gehen. Und schon gestern Abend wurde ein Kandidat präsentiert.
Joachim Gauck, der ehemalige DDR-Bürgerrechtler, soll also neuer Bundespräsident werden. Hinter den Kulissen, da gab es ein hartes Gerangel.
Glücklich sieht sie nicht gerade aus, die CDU-Chefin und Bundeskanzlerin Angela Merkel. Sie, die doch immer so darauf bedacht ist, das Heft des Handelns nie aus der Hand zu geben, macht am Sonntag eher den Eindruck einer Getriebenen. Nach dem kategorischen Beharren der FDP auf Gauck als Kandidaten bleibt ihr keine Wahl mehr. Entweder sie stimmt der Nominierung Gaucks, den sie 2010 noch abgelehnt hat, zu, oder sie riskiert den Bruch der Koalition.
Es war so, dass Frau Merkel wirklich vor einem Koalitionsbruch stand und sich dann für Joachim Gauck entschieden hat. Eine zugespitzte Situation.
Die FDP hat hoch gepokert. Man darf darüber spekulieren, inwiefern es jetzt wirklich um Herrn Gauck ging und um die neu entdeckte Liebe für Herrn Gauck bei der FDP oder ob es nicht mehr darum ging, ein Armdrücken zu machen mit Frau Merkel, mit der Bundeskanzlerin.
Und so wird schnell klar, wie begrenzt der Spielraum Merkels ist. Ihre Favoriten für die Wahl, der frühere Umweltminister Klaus Töpfer oder der ehemalige EKD-Vorsitzende Wolfgang Huber, stoßen bei der FDP auf totale Ablehnung. Die Liberalen wollen Gauck und wissen SPD und Grüne auf ihrer Seite. Die Brüskierung der Union nimmt man in Kauf. Fast schon suffisant kommentiert der FDP-Chef:
Ich freue mich sehr, dass wir uns gemeinsam heute auf die Unterstützung dieser Kandidatur verständigen konnten.
Über das Verhalten des Koalitionspartners ist man in der CDU äußerst verärgert, auch wenn man sich nun um Deeskalation bemüht.
Die Überraschung auf Seiten von CDU und CSU war groß, aber wir sollten jetzt nicht nachkarten, sondern nach vorne schauen. Aber es gilt natürlich hier das, was allgemein gilt. Man sieht sich im Leben immer zweimal. Und wenn die FDP sagt, wir können auch ohne die Union uns mal eigenständig profilieren, kann das die Union auch.
Der Ton also wird rauer bei Schwarz-Gelb. Die Wahlen im kommenden Jahr werfen offenbar bereits ihre Schatten voraus.
Frau Merkel und die Liberalen schauen auf das Ende. Und das Ende heißt Bundestagswahl 2013. Sie müssen beide mit einem Profil reinziehen. Frau Merkel braucht eine geschlossene Union und die FDP will zeigen, dass sie in dieser Koalition nicht nur der Wurmfortsatz gewesen ist.
Ob aber die 3%-Partei FDP sich mit diesem Vertrauensbruch wirklich einen Gefallen getan hat, wird sich zeigen. Denn Merkel kann durchaus ohne die Liberalen regieren, wie man bei der Großen Koalition gesehen hat. Die FDP aber würde ohne die Union wohl erst einmal keiner Regierung mehr angehören.
Ja, darüber wollen wir sprechen mit Dr. Frank Überall, dem Politologen. Am Freitag haben Sie hier noch den Rücktritt von Christian Wulff mit uns kommentiert. Ist da jetzt viel Porzellan zerbrochen?
Naja, es ist gerade in den Koalitionsfraktionen natürlich jetzt eine sehr ungemütliche Situation. Und ich würde ja fast empfehlen, dass die mal zu einer Art politischer Paartherapie gehen. Das, was die FDP da gemacht hat, dieses Vorpreschen, da hatte ich ja ursprünglich gedacht, vielleicht ist das Ganze nur ein abgesprochener Trick mit den Unionsparteien. Denn die FDP, die ja fast ums politische Überleben kämpft im Moment, es kann ja keiner Interesse haben in der CDU, CSU, dass die nicht bei der nächsten Bundestagswahl wieder reinkommen. Dann müsste man ja tatsächlich die große Koalition machen. Deswegen dachte ich, vielleicht bekommen die hier die Chance, sich mal zu produzieren, wo man dann eben später dem Schein nach drauf einschwenkt. Aber das scheint ja tatsächlich nicht der Fall zu sein. Sonst würden ja nicht heute viele Unionspolitiker so, ja, man kann sagen, herumätzen gegen ihren Koalitionspartner. Da ist viel Kit jetzt wieder notwendig, um dieses Porzellan wieder zusammenzubringen.
Ach so schlau war man dann doch nicht, diese Taktik, die Sie beschrieben haben, einzugehen. Schauen wir mal auf die Person von Joachim Gauck. Wofür steht er?
Also er steht auf jeden Fall für jemanden, der sympathisch ist, der auch rhetorisches Geschick hat, der mit dem Freiheitsbegriff verbunden wird. Also bevor er seine erste Rede als Bundespräsident gehalten hat, haben wir sozusagen schon ein Label, das man draufkleben kann. Auf der anderen Seite wird man auch viel Spaß mit ihm bekommen. Es wird viele, auch kontroverse Diskussionen geben. Gerade SPD und Grüne, die sich so massiv für ihn eingesetzt haben, werden an der einen oder anderen Stelle sicherlich auch mit ihm inhaltliche Differenzen austragen müssen.
Die Kanzlerin hat gesagt, was verbindet, ist seine Idee von Freiheit in Verantwortung. Allerdings, es gäbe auch Verschiedenheiten. Was meint sie möglicherweise damit?
Ja, es gibt eine ganze Reihe von Verschiedenheiten, zum Beispiel, wenn man sich anguckt, wie er die Occupy-Demonstrationen kommentiert hat, wenn man sich insgesamt sein Verhalten anguckt, dass er zum Teil Sarrazin gelobt haben soll. Das sind natürlich Dinge, die in der breiten Bevölkerung und auch in der Politik so nicht vertreten werden. Und ich bin sehr gespannt auf seine ersten Reden, wie er das versuchen will einzufangen. Er wird ein unbequemer Bundespräsident, aber das ist auf der anderen Seite ja auch was Schönes. Es ist ja nicht immer Streit, wenn es mal einen demokratischen und sinnvollen inhaltlichen Diskurs gibt.
Also Sie versprechen uns viel Spaß mit dem neuen Bundespräsidenten. Danke für Ihre Einschätzungen und damit weiter mit Verena.
Tja, was erwarten denn die Bürger von einem neuen Präsidenten? Hier haben wir erste Stimmen für Sie.
Ich hoffe, dass er unkorrumpierbar sein wird und ganz klar seine Sache durchziehen wird und vor allen Dingen seinem Gewissen verantwortlich sein wird.
Ich glaube, ich möchte gerne, dass er ehrlich ist, dass er offen ist und dass er die Meinung der Bürger vertritt.
Soll authentisch bleiben, so wie er jetzt gegenwärtig ist.
Mein Wunschkandidat ist es jetzt nicht direkt, aber ich kann mich damit abfinden oder identifizieren.
Er sollte vielleicht eine etwas saubere Vergangenheit haben.
Was wir jetzt brauchen, sind Leute mit einem moralischen Gerüst und mit wirklichen Grundsätzen und mit einem Standing, was Vertrauen schafft für die Leute, die doch suchen nach sowas.
Wenn der Gauck ein Rückgrat hätte, dann würde ich das nicht machen.
Er war ja eigentlich schon bei der letzten Bundespräsidentenwahl eigentlich der Präsident der Herzen. Und ich denke mal, es war zwar schwierig wahrscheinlich jetzt für die Bundeskanzlerin jetzt das zuzugeben, aber ich denke mal, es wird jetzt sicher ein guter Präsident werden.
Ja, und da kommt gerade eine Meldung, die vielleicht ganz gut da reinpasst. Jetzt hat man erfahren, dass die Kanzlerin übrigens Herrn Trittin von den Grünen nach der Telefonnummer von Herrn Gauck fragen musste.
Das ist auch
so
schön.
Bekannt war die Nummer noch nicht.
Ja, hinter den Kulissen, da hat es ja gestern einen so noch nicht dagewesenen Poker in der Koalition gegeben.
Ja, bis hin zur möglichen Drohung mit einem möglichen Bruch.
Die Bundeskanzlerin unter gewaltigem Druck. Hören wir mal rein, wie Sigmar Gabriel die Kanzlerin gestern erlebt hat.
Ich hatte, ich will es mal versuchen, vorsichtig zu formulieren, nicht den Eindruck, dass die Dynamik der letzten Stunden am Sonntagabend vor der Entscheidung von großer strategischen Überlegungen und übrigens auch nicht von unmittelbar einsehbarer Klarheit geprägt waren, um das mal zu umschreiben.
Tja, da schmunzelt Herr Gabriel gleich mal weiter zu unserem Politikexperten Heiner Bremer nach Berlin. Nun also doch, der Herr Gauck. Heiner, wie sehr belastet diese Wahl die schwarz-gelbe Koalition?
Naja, das Klima ist natürlich noch heftiger vergiftet, als es ohnehin schon war. Es hat immer wieder Reibungen in der letzten Zeit gegeben, insbesondere auf Arbeitsebene, also zwischen den einzelnen Mitgliedern der Fachausschüsse beider Koalitionsfraktionen. Und das Vorpreschen und das harte Durchsetzen der Personalie Gauck wird natürlich das Verhältnis nicht verbessern. Aber man muss auch sehen, die FDP hatte allen Grund, endlich mal Eigenständigkeit zu zeigen, zu beweisen, dass sie nicht nur ein Anhängsel ist, immer hörig der CDU folgt. Umgekehrt heißt es doch, oft genug ist die FDP von der CDU am Nasenring durch die politische Manege geführt worden. Denken wir nur an die Demütigung, die die FDP in Sachen Steuerpolitik erleben musste. Die CDU darf sich nicht wundern, dass eine solche Partei irgendwann auch mal zurückschlägt. Und das hat sie gestern gemacht, sehr geschickt. Sie hat Eigenständigkeit bewiesen. Sie hat sich sozusagen in ein Lager mit SPD und Grünen gestellt, und das trifft die CDU natürlich ganz besonders. Ob es der FDP wirklich weiterhilft im Überlebenskampf, ist eine ganz andere Frage. Da müssen auch neue Inhalte her.
Danke nach Berlin für diese Einschätzung, Heiner Bremer.
Der künftige Bundespräsident Joachim Gauck will den Menschen in Deutschland vermitteln, dass sie in einem Land leben können, das sie auch lieben können.
Ja, dieser Satz von ihm gibt möglicherweise einen Ausblick auf das, was wir von ihm erwarten können.
Ginge es nach der Bevölkerung, dann wäre er schon 2010 Bundespräsident geworden. Der 1940 in Rostock geborene Joachim Gauck hat sich durch seinen steten Einsatz für Freiheit und Demokratie ein hohes Ansehen erarbeitet. Fast 50 Jahre lang war sein Leben geprägt vom totalitären SED-Regime. Seine ablehnende Haltung gegenüber der DDR verinnerlicht er schon in frühester Kindheit, als sein Vater quasi über Nacht verschleppt und wegen angeblicher Spionage verurteilt wird. Getrieben von dem Wunsch freiheitlichen Denkens beginnt Gauck 1958 ein Theologiestudium. Geplagt von Orientierungslosigkeit und unter der Diktatur leidend, bringt er es erst 1965 zu Ende. Danach arbeitet Joachim Gauck als Pfarrer und gerät durch seine Kritik an der DDR-Führung schnell ins Visier der Staatssicherheit. Direkt nach der Wiedervereinigung wird Gauck zum Leiter der Stasi-Unterlagenbehörde, später Gauck-Behörde, ernannt. Trotz seiner zahlreichen negativen Erfahrungen mit dem DDR-Regime führt er sein Amt objektiv und frei von Rachegedanken aus, was ihm große Beliebtheit in der Öffentlichkeit einbringt. Auch nach Ende seiner Amtszeit setzt sich Gauck für Freiheit und Demokratie ein und erhält zahlreiche Auszeichnungen. Nach dem Rücktritt Horst Köhlers 2010 wird der parteienlose Gauck von SPD und Grünen als Kandidat für das Amt des Bundespräsidenten vorgeschlagen. Obwohl sein Gegenkandidat Christian Wulff von den Regierungsparteien aufgestellt wird, kann dieser sich erst im dritten Wahlgang durchsetzen. Schon damals hatte Joachim Gauck herausragende Beliebtheitswerte in der Bevölkerung, woran sich bis heute nichts geändert hat.
Und auch im Internet ist der künftige Bundespräsident Joachim Gauck heute das zentrale Thema. Wie sind denn die Reaktionen, Moritz Wedel?
Ja, Verena, recht positiv sind die Reaktionen, beispielsweise bei uns in der Community unter facebook.com/Netzreporter. Da hört man oder liest man dann Reaktionen wie diese hier von Tom. Hoffentlich bringt Joachim Gauck wieder Vertrauen in das Amt des Bundespräsidenten und zeigt etwas mehr Volksnähe, anstatt Schnäppchenvorteile von Freunden in Anspruch zu nehmen. Nick schreibt, ich glaube fest daran, dass er die Regierung mal in geordnete Bahnen bringt. Und Sönke hat sich die Pressekonferenz hier gestern auf NTV angeschaut und hat gesagt, ja, total sympathisch, dieser Gauck, der ist eine gute Wahl. Und auf Twitter natürlich auch viel der Diskussion über den nominierten Bundespräsidenten. Jetzt bekommen wir den Bundespräsidenten, den wir schon vor 2 Jahren wollten. Es bewahrheitet sich, am Ende wird alles gut, schreibt Jan zumindest. Ja, und das Netz wollte ja vor 2 Jahren Joachim Gauck als Bundespräsidenten. Da gab es sogar Online-Kampagnen, aber er wird auch kritisch gesehen. Seine Äußerungen zu Sarrazin werden kritisch gesehen. Zur Occupy-Bewegung, die sei nämlich kindisch, sagte einmal Gauck. Auch die Demos von Stuttgart 21-Gegnern findet er doof. WikiLeaks sieht er sehr kritisch und deshalb kritisieren ihn dort auch die Netzmenschen, wenn man sie mal so nennen möchte. Und diese Netzmenschen, sie tauschen auch dieses Foto gerade sehr massiv. Gauck zwischen Carsten Maschmeyer und Veronika Ferres. Ja, eine Parallele zu Wulff, hoffentlich die einzige.
Dankeschön, Moritz Wedel, für diese kontroversen Einblicke ins Internet.
Ja, apropos Christian Wulff, da sehen wir ihn noch, wie er zusammen mit seiner Frau am Freitag das Schloss Bellevue verlässt.
Der mögliche neue Hausherr Joachim Gauck hat auch eine Frau an seiner Seite. Über die ist bisher allerdings nicht allzu viel bekannt.
Von der zweiten Reihe in die erste wird Joachim Gauck von der Bundesversammlung zum neuen Bundespräsidenten gewählt. So heißt Deutschlands neue First Lady nicht Gauck, sondern Schad, Daniela Schad. Und da bahnt sich schon eine kleine Revolution im Schloss Bellevue an. Die beiden sind nämlich nicht verheiratet. Er ist 72 und damit 20 Jahre älter als seine Lebensgefährtin. Joachim Gauck ist immer noch mit der Mutter seiner 4 Kinder verheiratet. Seit 12 Jahren lebt er in wilder Ehe mit Medienprofi Daniela Schad. Sie arbeitet als Journalistin für die Nürnberger Zeitung und ist dort für Innenpolitik zuständig. Eine Fernbeziehung.
Ich denke, das Schöne an Joachim Gauck ist, dass er wirklich mutig ist und dass er nicht flau ist, dass er sehr begeisterungsfähig ist. Und das teilt sich doch den Menschen in einer ganz umfangreichen Weise mit.
In Frankfurt hat die gebürtige Hessin Germanistik, Politik und Literatur studiert. Sie liebt Bücher, klassische Musik, Radfahren und Joachim Gauck. Und der hatte 2010 angekündigt, würde er Präsident, so könne er sich vorstellen, seine Dani, wie er sie nennt, zu heiraten. Dafür muss er sich aber erstmal nach über 20 Jahren Trennung von seiner ersten Frau scheiden lassen.
Ja, und der Karnevalszug hier in Köln zum Beispiel, der läuft natürlich, der Rosenmontagszug. Und natürlich ist Christian Wulff ein großes Thema.
Ganz genau. Und die Karnevalsgesellschaften mussten ihre Motive jetzt natürlich noch auf den letzten Drücker ändern. Ursprünglich sollte nämlich Wulff hier als Kaninchen auf der Schlachtbank vorgeführt werden. Jetzt gibt es stattdessen einen deutschen Michel zu sehen, der den Ex-Bundespräsidenten aus einem viel zu großen Anzug, also aus seinem Amt, herauszieht.
Ja, das nennt man Spontanität. Kurz noch reagiert. Das war etwas einfacher in Mainz. Da sah man nämlich ein angeschlagenes Staatsoberhaupt und da machte man schlicht und ergreifend ein K.O. daraus. Das war einfach.
In the midst of the Cold War, here the Soviet Union and the United States poised to annihilate each other with nuclear weapons, and it was an extraordinary time.
Of course, we were all given orders, which were supposed to be secret, to come to Washington and to not discuss the reason for those orders with anyone, even our wives.
NASA finally got interested in sending somebody into space. It was such a new thing. It was all very, very secret at that time. We went through a long selection process, and which included physical and psychological and every measurement they knew how to make on the human body, I guess. So when we finally came down on we were finally selected, we were very happy to be there and felt honored to be among the 7 to be selected.
Well, I realized that I had been chosen to be part of the first team. That was the end-all, be-all for me.
The original 7 were, of course, figures that were revered. The engineers who were doing the designs, the launch crews who were doing the day in and day out work, and then the crew shimmying in into those little tin cans called capsules that were taking us into the heavens.
The mission was planned to come back and land on the water. And so we did a lot of water training on it too, as to what would happen if you had a leak in the spacecraft after you once hit the water, what the impact would be, if you're underwater, could you get out? And training like that tried to train for every possible contingency.
When I got to fly the shuttle, I knew what to expect. I think when John flew his first flight, he didn't know what to expect. And that's a huge difference. When John first launched, he was on a brand new rocket, never been to orbit before. We didn't know how humans would react in zero-G. We didn't know whether they'd be able to eat. Some people said their eyes wouldn't focus. All kinds of crazy stories that John told me that they told him before he launched to expect. He didn't believe any of those, and most of them were not true, but we just didn't know back then.
The day that I finally went, that was the third time I had actually suited up and been on top, been locked in and ready to go. But when you finally get in the thing and you're ready to go, you're very, very busy. People think you're in there contemplating great thoughts, and I think it's more likely you're in there, as I was, double-checking all the instrumentation and talking to the people on the ground crew to make sure that everything was okay for launch.
That countdown for the launch is something you've done time and time and time again, so it was, in a sense, just another day at the office. But this was real, and it caught everybody's attention.
Godspeed, John Glenn. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. Loud and clear. Roger, we're programming and roll okay.
Godspeed, John Glenn. I was in the blockhouse when he was, and the last to speak to him before liftoff. Gus and Al had both done that, but they weren't riding on this big, big fuel tank that had the ability to give him more speed than what Al and Gus had had. They didn't have enough to coast all the way around the world. They just had enough to go up a little ways and fall back to Earth.
People look at all this fire and smoke on the ground, and they think you're under huge stress inside. You're not. The thrust is just barely greater than the weight of the spacecraft, so you lift off very gently. And the more the fuel burns out there, the lighter it becomes, and the thrust is still high. So the farther you go up here on this entry into space, the more G's you feel inside.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. Roger, turnaround has started. Roger, capsule turning around, and I could see the booster during turnaround just a couple of 100 yards behind me. It was beautiful. Roger, 7. You have a go. At least 7 orbits. Roger, understand go for at least 7 orbits.
Everything worked perfectly, and then there was an indication that John's heat shield was loose, which meant that after the 3rd orbit and on the deorbit that he would burn up if it was.
Well, I certainly want to make it a two-way trip and come back, of course.
It's the first thing I actually remember in my whole life is sitting in front of our nice black and white TV on the floor, because I had to get real close because, I was really excited about this, watching the John Glenn flight. And the thing I remember most about it is sitting there worrying about whether or not John Glenn was going to survive when that heat shield was getting loose.
During re-entry then, instead of jettisoning that retro pack here and getting it off so I had a clean heat shield for re-entry, we left that on so that the heat shield would be held in place until the aerodynamic force of re-entry would tend to hold the heat shield in place. Now that made for an interesting, well, the re-entry was going to be interesting anyway, But it was even more interesting because as I would glance occasionally out the little window, I could see chunks of that retro pack breaking up and coming back by the window.
My condition is good, but that was a real fireball, boy. I had great chunks of that retro pack breaking off all the way through. Rocking quite a bit. I may still have some of that pack on. I can't damp it either.
And I couldn't be absolutely certain then whether it was the heat shield breaking up or the retro pack. And obviously it was the retro pack or it wouldn't be here today. But anyway, it was that kind of re-entry was the second problem we had in addition to the control system failure.
If you listen to the tapes, it's pretty clear that he knows that there's something going on there, and it's not the normal procedure because he knew the procedures really well. He knew that retro pack should have been gone.
Coming out of the blackout period and saying, Houston, this is Friendship 7. And of course the nation went nuts. The world went nuts.
Main chute is on green. Chute is out in reef condition at 10,800 feet and beautiful chute. Chute looks good. On O2 emergency and the chute looks very good.
His odds of not surviving this was about 1 in 6. So it was an extremely high-risk, unknown effort that they were going into, having never done it before.
And it came time for aligning the capsule and the proper attitude for retrofire. There was under-thrust of the rockets themselves, and the result of the intermittently failed horizon scanner meant that the rockets were pointed in the wrong direction. Each one of those failures made me fly a little bit too far, and it all added up to 250 miles. Had a lot of people frightened. I was not frightened by that because, contrary to their lack of knowledge about my location, I knew exactly where I was. I was back on the water where I wanted to be.
We did research. We learned the new things first. And those were, and with a little investment and educated citizenry, away we went. We became a leader in the world in just about a century and a quarter.
It was a total, resounding success. And it was a great, great honor and pleasure to be a part of such a marvelous and successful program.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Ohio State University. My name is Ray Lugo and I'm the director of the NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today's NASA Futures Forum here at the Ohio State University. I'm very proud of the partnership we have at the Glenn Research Center with the Ohio State University as we continue to work together to find opportunities to build our relationship and collaborate on the maturation of technology and hopefully the commercialization of those technologies. Today we are here on the 50th anniversary of Great American's first space flight. I was 5 years old when this man went into space. I was home with the mumps. It's a disease that I think has been wiped out in this country. But my mom let me watch Senator Glenn's first flight. And I can remember with anticipation, wondering if he was going to make it back safely. So today we are here looking back on Senator Glenn's first flight, on a career with the hope of unlocking the secrets of innovation that have made this country great. Ohio, aeronautics, space exploration, innovation, all of these words embody the reasons we are here today. It's my pleasure to introduce my boss, himself a member of the astronaut corps, a Marine, and now the NASA administrator, Mr. Charles Bolden.
Ray, thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks very much, and I want to thank all of you for coming today, because this is it's a very important day. As Ray mentioned, it's the 50th anniversary of John's first flight into space aboard Friendship 7, a very special day for the United States, because it established our leadership in space, and it's a leadership that we've not relinquished since. It's really important for us to be here because he is home. And as a native of Ohio here, all of you should be very proud. I'm incredibly honored to be sitting here with him today. I had the opportunity to be with him and Scott Carpenter last week at the Kennedy Space Center. It was just phenomenal. But what we're going to be doing over the next couple of days is we're going to talk about the future. This is a future forum. So we're going to try to talk about vision. We're going to try to take advantage of what John sees for the future based on his experiences of the past. And we want to give you an opportunity to share that with us. Today, America's space program is alive and vital, and it's filled with people like many of you who sit in this audience, or people that you've been seeing on television and you're going to see right now, because we have a special treat that I'm not sure Senator Glenn, he probably is beginning to get a hint that something funny is going on here.
Something's amiss.
But this is an honor for me to be able to introduce Commander Dan Burbank and Flight Engineer Don Pettit live from the International Space Station to have just a chat with the Senator. So, crew, how do you read me?
Charlie, we've got you loud and clear. Welcome aboard the International Space Station.
This is absolutely incredible.
Hey, I'd just like to say that we know you have an awful lot on your plate for the next couple of days, and we're delighted just to get a chance to be here at the opening and to maybe just take a few moments to commemorate Senator Glenn's flight. 50 years ago today, Friendship 7 was orbiting planet Earth, and that helped in a very big way pave the way for America to become a space power and to go to the moon and to do the things that we're doing right now on the International Space Station. And we hope it's also going to help set the stage for us down the road to do even greater things.
Well, Dan and Don, I thank you both very much, but we're going to turn the tables on Senator Glenn right now, if it's okay with you. He's been getting pummeled with questions, and he is probably the biggest champion of the International Space Station. So I'd like to give him an opportunity to kind of pummel you with some questions about life up there, since he's campaigning already for a trip to station. So I want you to wise him up, if you will. So, Senator, if you'd like to pose a couple of questions for him or some comments to them.
You guys are not floating. You got your foot in the strap? You're not. How are you secured there? You got a belt on?
Senator Glenn, it's great to talk with you. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. And he's going to hand my head to me on a platter if I'm not careful with this talk about going to the station. But no, I know you're floating around. That's one of the things you can do up there. And one of the zero-G environment, of course, is why you're up there to begin with, to do the research that can be done there. What are you doing, hanging on? Are you tethered?
It'll take them a little while.
Yeah.
Actually, I've got one foot underneath a bungee, another foot underneath a handrail. I think Don right now is free floating, and behind us is André Kuipers, European Space Agency, Dutch astronaut with us, and Andre's basically free floating as well. It took us a little while to kind of get our space legs, so to speak, but everybody's pretty comfortable managing their orientation in any number of ways.
Do you have any estimate, I don't know whether you know the exact number of research experiments you have on board right now. Do you have any idea of how many are on board?
I knew he was going to give it to Don.
We have well over 100, and they all come with an acronym that you either have no vowels in them, so it makes it really hard to pronounce, or you can't remember what all the words, all the letters stood for in the first place. However, I would like to say that the experiments we have, we've got a whole ensemble of life science experiments that basically probe the gravity knob for life, since it evolved on Earth under constant gravity, and now all of a sudden we can change the magnitude of gravity by a factor of 1,000,000, and we can look at what the effects are on living organisms, including human beings, under that. And then we have physical science experiments, growing crystals, looking at surface tension and other related phenomenon that gravity masks, and then combustion experiments. I did a whole suite of combustion experiments this morning. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, are you able to keep combustion going with less fuel required? I know that was one of the things that they came up on Columbia before it was destroyed.
You know, that I don't know. I do know that you have to fan the flames if you want to keep them going up here. We're looking at forced convection, and the fuel that I was looking at this morning with help from folks from NASA Glenn was ethylene. We're looking at 20% ethylene and burning that in air under forced convection, and looking at when you get separation of the flame from the fixture that holds it.
That's very interesting. I've thought those energy experiments that were started on Columbia, I thought were fascinating, and they had a lot of important future maybe right here on Earth. I don't know whether people here in the audience right here today realize, but you know, a candle has a flame goes up because the air is heated and the convection goes up and pulls the flame up. But in space, when something burns, it just collects in a big cloud around it. So you get a whole different set of burning and combustion principles than anything you can't duplicate that here on Earth. And there were some of the indications were that we might be able to have combustion with far less use of fuel on some of the Columbia experiments, and that's what you're continuing that right now, I guess. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator Glenn, and I find it philosophically interesting that civilization started with fire and learning how to use fire, and it's served us well for millennia, and we are slowly refining our understanding of what fire is, because fire will work whether or not you really understand all the details of the chemistry. Yeah. And what we're doing now is, again, using a reduced gravity environment which changes the dynamics of combustion so that we can dissect even more detail out from how fire works, which is obviously a needed element even as we leave planet Earth and go off into the go away from the planet.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, we've got a number of very young students here with us, and I know I was watching you earlier. It may have been a replay, but the first handshake between a humanoid robot and a human in space. Can you talk a little bit about R2 and whether R2 is behaving or is developing a mind of its own already?
Yeah, we were talking about that. We wanted to make sure that all three laws of robotics had been incorporated. But in all seriousness, a couple of days ago we had Robonaut R2 out here in the lab, and we were basically doing some checkouts on it. And at this stage, really, it's a technology development program. And the idea is that all the interfaces, all the things that we have on space station that we interact with are all designed for humans, for human hands, for human arm length, for the parallax that human eyes provide, and essentially Robonaut has the same functionality, the same capability as far as interacting with hardware. So it affords down the road a very good opportunity to take the tasks that are routine and perhaps some of the tasks that might be more dangerous for crew members to do, and basically help offload us and share those tasks with an anthropoid robot. And ultimately, I think it also has a lot of promise for doing spacewalks, and those can be, of course, one of the most dangerous things we do in space.
Now, put the three of you guys on the spot, because I don't think the senator's ever been asked a question from space. So how about if the three of you put your heads together, play like you're a newsman, and give us a question that's really rough for him.
Thanks a lot.
And Annie's sweating beads under.
So, Senator Glenn, did you ever really find out what the fireflies were on your first orbit?
Yeah, we did. I think the, Scott Carpenter on the second flight was able to hit the side of the spacecraft, the capsule, and send a whole shower of them out. And the scientists working on this, they could relate them to the water dripping out through the heat exchanger, which was a controlled thing. And then they just collected in a large cloud around the spacecraft. The one thing I don't know that scientists have ever figured out yet is why the glowing luminous color. Water particles will go out and freeze, and then the light comes from the sun and through the Earth's atmosphere and back out to the spacecraft again. And what changes the light in that, what is refracted there so that when it hit these frozen particles, they glow sort of a glowing luminous color. And I don't know that we ever figured that one out. If we do, I don't know what the answer was on it, but they weren't anything that was going to do me any harm, so I wasn't too concerned about them.
If you guys had an opportunity to bring this, since he's bugging me all the time, if you had an opportunity to bring him up for, say, a couple of months stint on station, okay, Annie, I'm just kidding. Which experiment that you're doing now would you most like to hand off to him, and why?
You know, one thing that we didn't talk about already, which I think is a key thing that we're doing on board Space Station right now. We do a lot of the life sciences and physical sciences, but one thing that we're doing on station really, I think, falls in the category of engineering development, technology development. And I think this is some of the key things that will help us leave low Earth orbit, go on to the moon, asteroids, and on to Mars. And I think one of the things that we learn an awful lot about every day that we get a chance to interact with it is the regenerative environmental control system that we have here. So I think, based on his experience, the Senator's experience, it would be really neat, very interesting to get a chance to work with him on the systems that we have to provide that capability. If we spend so much time sometimes focused on the details of those tasks, it would be really good to have a big picture look on about that, and also from somebody who has thought about leaving low Earth orbit from the perspective of lawmakers in our government.
And really what Dan meant to say was, when he was talking about the regenerative life support system, that's a fancy word for our toilet. And so he wants to put Senator Glenn busy fixing the plumbing up here.
That's exactly what I thought I was going to get assigned to. Thank you.
And I think now that Don's pointed it out, I may find myself replaced outright with the Senator.
You got anything else for the
crew
there?
One other question. Do you have any plant growth studies on board right now? Because those are fascinating, too.
Well, just as a little investigation on the side, I've been growing a few plants. And as Senator Glenn, I was able to get a zucchini plant to bloom, and it bloomed on Valentine's Day, and I had a special conference with my wife, and I presented her with a zucchini flower. I mean, it's not a rose, it's not a lily, it's not a carnation. It was a zucchini blossom, and she could only see it on the downlink video. But I did pick that blossom, and I stuck it in our World Atlas. I'm pressing it between pages, and I'm going to bring that home and give it to her.
That's good. Great.
Everybody went, oh. Hey, we're here for a future forum, so for the next...
One thing.
Go ahead.
Just so everybody here, I wonder about how far around the Earth they've traveled just while we've been talking to them. Probably a fourth of the distance around the Earth, just in the time we've been talking.
Either of you watching the map?
No, they're not, probably.
And I'd say that's about right. Yeah, so it's been basically a fourth of the way around the Earth. So in the order of about 10,000 kilometers thereabouts.
Yeah.
Quick question for you. As I was saying, we're here for a future forum for the next day and a half. You know, just from what you've seen so far, what would you like to be a topic that this group considers in terms of where should we be 20 years from now or 30 years from now, based on what you've seen and experienced this time? And, you know, I know it's your second time up there, Don.
Well, I think there's a lot of aspects to that. And I think one thing that, one of the biggest challenges that we have on board Space Station that we've probably had in any spacecraft before, and it's something that with the Space Shuttle, we really didn't have this case. In the Space Shuttle, every time we flew it, we returned it to the factory in essence. We returned it to the people who knew how to build it. On board Space Station right now, astronauts have to be essentially jacks of all trade. We need to be able to fix anything and everything that happens. We need to essentially be professional technicians on a par with the people that for decades have put their heart and soul into taking care of incredibly complicated and exotic vehicles in the form of the Space Shuttle. If we leave low Earth orbit, one of the key things, one of the most important things I think we need to have is we need to have the capability to essentially cut the umbilical, to be able to maintain spacecraft to the degree that if something breaks, you can replace a part outright. You need to be able to fabricate a part. You cannot bring with you all the pieces and parts that you might anticipate that might break over the course of a couple of year mission. So one of the key technologies, and it's something that I think is a unique need for spaceflight, is to find some way to be able to fabricate parts that we can replace, and to be able to do those things, obviously in conjunction with the ground that's going to help you, talk you through those things remotely. But the fabrication part and the repair capability is one of the biggest challenges I think we have.
And then I think that one aspect of going away from Earth that we need to think hard about is, do we take everything with us on the mission from planet Earth? Do we lift everything we need from Earth's gravity well? Or do we figure out how to take materials from elsewhere and use them to enable missions? And this all boils down to what I refer to as the tyranny of the rocket equation, and what the engineering implications are to the rocket equation for the design of our rockets that we launch from the surface of Earth, and the implications of how much payload can any given rocket take up, and what do you use for that payload. And when you look at building bases elsewhere, it's going to take hundreds of tons of material to build and maintain a base, and how do we get those hundreds of tons of material up into space? And I think we need to do some serious thinking about the rocket equation, maybe alternate ways to try to get things into space that don't necessarily use the rocket equation, and possibly think about getting materials, brute force and ignorance materials that we need by the multi-ton from other than planet Earth.
Don, let me ask you one. Go ahead, Andres.
Let me ask you one. Go ahead, Andres.
Yes, as an international representative of the international partner, I think it would be nice to add the question to the future forum, how the future is going to be in the sense of international cooperation. We work together with a lot of partners here now, and I'm curious what the forum thinks about going beyond Earth orbit as an international effort.
Fantastic. I appreciate that, because I'm thinking about it. We don't have a lot of time left, but let me ask you all to just tell all of us, if you can, you know, we're getting ready to send the first private spacecraft up to get ready to bring you supplies. What type of training are you doing to stay ready there on board in case, you know, the Dragon or Cygnus happens to get there during your watch?
That's a great question, and it's really important for us to be able to maintain currency, and that comes right down to the piloting skills of being able to do a robotics capture of a free-flying vehicle. And should SpaceX Dragon make it here during my watch, and I hope it does, the way we're keeping ourselves current is by practicing using a program called Robot, and that is essentially a robotic simulator that uses some of the tools we already have developed at Johnson Space Center by folks that work in the virtual reality lab there. And those tools allow us to essentially simulate the environment right down to the dynamics of how the space station robotic arm works, the dynamics of the motion control system of Dragon, and very high fidelity graphics. And it allows us to essentially go through all of the crew coordination skills and the monkey skills of flying the arm right up to capture. And we can do it multiple times. In addition to that, we can also do dry run captures using the real space station robotic arm to grapple fixtures on space station. That's something we have done a couple of weeks ago.
Hey, I want to thank you guys. I know it's, you're really busy up there. I appreciate you taking time to just help us entertain this crowd here, and I'm going to turn it over to Senator Glenn for a final farewell.
Well, this is really a great surprise this morning. I didn't know I was going to have the honor of talking to you guys up there, and I just was sitting here thinking a minute ago about how technology has gone ahead so rapidly in the space age, because here we are watching high-definition television here, and you guys coming through perfectly. Back in the Mercury days, we had to go over each station on the ground apart and couldn't even keep communications. Now we have the TDRS Technical Data Relay satellite that you relay through, so you have constant communication around the Earth. It's just amazing that we can sit here and talk to you back and forth. So thank you very much for helping kick off our forum. It's really great. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
And from and I guess from the Ohio State University, I'm learning.
You're learning.
The home of the Buckeyes. We're going to pass it back to Houston and let you guys go about your work. But thanks again. This has just been incredible for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure for us as well.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Okay. Something my mom taught me a while back was never follow an act like that. It was great. I tell you, the ability to have a conversation with people living and working in space, again, something I would have never thought of when I was a 5-year-old boy watching Senator Glenn and his mission.
We learned the new things first. And we with an educated citizenry, a little investment, wow, new whole businesses and industries, and whether it was better ways of making steel or automobiles or whatever it was, we led the world in innovation and technology, and that's where the new and good jobs came from.
Senator John Glenn spoke during a NASA Future Forum at The Ohio State University about the fundamental elements that once made America a leading innovator and their importance to the nation's future. NASA officials, university representatives, and students participated in a panel discussion about NASA's role in advancing innovation, technology, science, engineering, education, and the economy. The Future Forum coincided with the 50th anniversary of Glenn's historic Friendship 7 spaceflight. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station sent a congratulatory message and talked with Glenn during an in-flight call from the station.
50 years ago today, Friendship 7 was orbiting planet Earth, and that helped in a very big way pave the way for America to become a space power and to go to the moon and to do the things that we're doing right now on the International Space Station.
It's my privilege today to be here to share NASA's fiscal year 2013 budget.
NASA Administrator Charles Bolden and Chief Financial Officer Beth Robinson outlined the President's fiscal year 2013 budget proposal for NASA during a news conference at NASA headquarters. The proposed budget would enable NASA to continue the space exploration program envisioned by President Obama, one that creates jobs and spurs the American economy well into the future, while sending us farther into space than ever before.
We've made steady and tangible progress on the next generation deep space crew capsule and our new heavy lift rocket that will launch astronauts on journeys to destinations farther in our solar system. Those priorities are funded in this budget. Already, we've been doing test firings of the J2X engine that will power the heavy lift's upper stage. Orion has undergone water drop tests for its eventual ocean landing. Funding is included in this budget to keep this important work going.
(2012's first test of the J2X, NASA's first human-rated engine to be developed in 40 years, is in the books. Engineers at the Stennis Space Center conducted a short 1.8-second test firing of the J2X power pack. The power pack comprises components on the top portion of the engine designed to generate the thrust needed to power the upper stage of NASA's Space Launch System, the next-generation heavy-lift launch vehicle that will be capable of missions beyond low Earth orbit.
It's a pretty important test. We have had the facility down for almost 2 years. So the first test allows us to get the facility up and operational and to make sure that it can do the things it's supposed to do to support the J2X power pack test.
Stennis is planning to conduct about a dozen tests on the power pack from now through this summer.
Misha, what should I do?
The Expedition 30 crew conducted the International Space Station's 30th Russian-based spacewalk. Cosmonauts Oleg Kononenko and Anton Shkaplerov spent a total of 6 hours, 15 minutes completing a variety of work on the orbiting outpost. The duo moved one of 2 Strela cargo cranes from the Piers docking compartment to the Poisk Mini research module and installed a materials sample experiment, which will investigate the effects of space on the mechanical properties of those materials. The pair was unable to complete all of the originally planned work, including the installation of 5 protective shields on the Zvezda service module. This was the 3rd spacewalk for Kononenko and the 1st for Shkaplerov.
So man meets machine aboard the International Space Station.
Another first inside the space station. Expedition 30 Commander Dan Burbank and Robonaut completed the first handshake between a humanoid robot and an astronaut in space. The historic milestone took place during a 2-day checkout of Robonaut's joints, hands, and fingers. Robonaut is designed with the dexterity to complete work in space typically performed by humans. Designed at the Johnson Space Center, Robonaut was launched to the station on STS-133, the final flight of Space Shuttle Discovery. A special Valentine's Day treat for space fans in the Washington, D.C. area. 3 NASA astronauts from recent ISS expeditions shared experiences from those missions, complete with pictures. A captive headquarters audience heard from flight engineers Katie Coleman of Expedition 2627, Ron Guerin of Expedition 2728, and Mike Fossum, an Expedition 28 flight engineer and commander of Expedition 29.
And so we're really excited to come to Washington today and to NASA headquarters to say thanks to all of the people here that helped make this possible, that have worked for so many decades on the International Space Station program, and to now really see it come into life.
For me, if I could have packed up my whole family and brought them, and I'm actually taking this quote from Don Pettit, who's up there, I would have brought them. I mean, there's actually no reason for people not to live there just all the time.
The astronauts participated in several other events later that day, including a tweet-up at NASA headquarters with Guerin, a presentation by Coleman and Fossum at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, and an appearance by all 3 at the University of Maryland in College Park. If you enjoyed the Saturday morning science demonstrations performed by astronaut Don Pettit during his previous space missions, Pettit, now a member of the Expedition 30 crew, is back at it again.
I'm going to take a syringe with a little Teflon cannula. I'm going to squirt drops of water out, and look what happens when those drops of water get close to that charged knitting needle.
NASA and the American Physical Society have partnered to share unique videos of Pettit using everyday objects to demonstrate physics in his new series, Science Off the Sphere. The videos will be posted on the APS website, Physics Central. Winners providing answers to challenge questions posed during the series will be recognized by Pettit during a future episode from space.
The Glenn Research Center recently hosted media representatives at its Space Power facility. There, inside the Clean Room High Bay facility, a new communications test bed that'll fly on the International Space Station was going through its checkout. The Space Communications and Navigation, or SCAN, test bed will be the first space hardware for exploring the promise of software-defined radio technology.
The interesting part of this SCAN testbed are its 3 software-defined radios. These are radios that can be completely reconfigured on orbit by software. That means new operating environments, new applications that will change the characteristics of how it communicates.
After crating in a special container provided by the Kennedy Space Center, the SCAN testbed will be sent to Japan's Tanegashima Space Center for its scheduled launch to the ISS later this year.
In recognition of the contributions by African Americans to the cause of space exploration, this week at NASA profiles Karen Harper, IT Workforce Manager for the Office of the Chief Information Officer at NASA headquarters.
Good morning, this is Karen Harper. How may I help you? The responsibility that I have within the Office of the CIO is to look at their IT workforce and make sure that we have the appropriate competencies to do the job within the IT community for the agency. In that is looking at workforce analysis, workforce gaps in terms of the IT community, and then being able to make recommendations to the CIO where we perceive to be gaps and how we can plan for the future and the next generation of workers, the IT workers within NASA. I started out as with the Air Force in human resource management. So that prepared me for 13, 14 years looking at the workforce. Starting in 1995, I started working for Glenn Research Center as the legislative liaison officer for the center director. And in that position, I had the opportunity to help advocate the technology, the importance of the NASA Center throughout the state of Ohio. Let's see if you can take a look. Mentoring touches my heart, and it's because when I was growing up, other than having a very loving family, I did not have any mentoring relationships. I was discouraged by a guidance counselor that told me I was not college material. Went to a deep place for me to prove that I could go to college. I was college material. I did graduate, went on to pursue my master's. I think for a young person to be prepared, they need to get engaged in STEM disciplines and understand the value of math and science in preparing yourself for whatever career that you choose.
35 years ago, on February 18, 1977, Enterprise, the first space shuttle orbiter, completed its first flight test at the Dryden Flight Research Center. Constructed without an engine, Enterprise was mounted atop a Boeing 747 shuttle carrier aircraft to measure structural integrity, handling qualities, and other capabilities prior to atmospheric flight. Enterprise never flew in space, but it was crucial to the space shuttle program. The approach and landing tests it performed that year demonstrated that the orbiter could fly in the atmosphere and land like an airplane, except without power, like a glider. Enterprise was named for the starship on the popular television series Star Trek.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And February 20th is the 50th anniversary of John Glenn's historic flight aboard Friendship 7. On that flight, Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth, circling the globe 3 times. As he passed over Perth, Western Australia, residents there turned on house lights and street lights, earning Perth the nickname the City of Light. There were some tense moments near the end of the 4-hour, 55-minute Mercury mission as flight controllers could not determine if the capsule's heat shield was intact during re-entry. But the capsule returned to Earth without incident. Glenn was later celebrated as a national hero during a ticker tape parade in New York City.
Good day and welcome to Mission Control Houston, where it's another day for the flight control team watching over the Expedition 30 crew aboard the International Space Station. Everything working very well on board the space station as the crew continues to do scientific research work as well as a lot of maintenance today. Among the different activities that are being conducted by the crew today are some cabin fan assembly cleaning, where the crew does a full inspection and look at the vent system that's used to circulate air throughout the International Space Station. That's very important with the lack of gravity on board the space station, because if you don't circulate the air properly, you could have pockets of carbon dioxide buildup that could be harmful to the crew. This is some video recorded of Andre Kuipers as he worked with that assembly inspection of the various ventilation systems and pumps that move air throughout the space station. In addition, the crew in the Russian segment of the space station working on a inspection of the treadmill vibration isolation system. That's the treadmill that's in the floor of the Zvezda service module and used by Russian astronauts and cosmonauts to exercise. That treadmill system, originally built by NASA, has since been deeded to the Russian Federal Space Agency, one of the 5 partners in this international collection of agencies, and is used to as a secondary exercise. There is a full gym in the Tranquility module of the International Space Station that includes another treadmill, an advanced resistive exercise device, and there are also several stationary bicycles on board the space station. Here in the flight control room, Ron Spencer is the flight director that's in charge of the team. Hal Getzelman is the communicator. He'll be talking with the crew on anything that requires voice communication. The crew on board the space station, of course, is Commander Dan Burbank, flight engineers Anton Shkaplerov and Anatoly Ivanishin, as well as Oleg Kononenko of the Russian Space Agency. Also on board, flight engineer Don Pettit and flight engineer Andre Kuipers of the European Space Agency. Today's activities, in addition to the maintenance, will be work with several different experiments, and that will include some fluid experiments as well as some materials experiments that are going on today. All told, the activities on the station going really well, and Commander Burbank and Flight Engineer Kuipers just completed an educational event with the Tri-District Consortium of Schools of Newton, New Jersey. That event will be replayed in today's NASA video file.
Good morning and welcome to today's International Space Station Update Hour. You're looking now inside of the flight control room here in Houston, Texas, where the Orbit 2 team is currently on console, monitoring all of the systems on board the orbiting complex. Today's team is being led by Flight Director Ron Spencer, there in the center of your screen, and joining him at the console position is Capcom Hal Getzelman, serving as the voice link communication between controllers here on the ground and the astronauts in space. And those astronauts are the crew of Expedition 30, being led by NASA astronaut Dan Burbank there in the front left of your screen, and then behind him are Russian cosmonauts Anton Shkaplerov and Anatoly Ivanishin. Also across the back row are European Space Agency astronaut Andre Kuipers, NASA astronaut Don Pettit, and finally in the front right, Russian cosmonaut Oleg Kononenko. A fairly maintenance-heavy day for the astronauts currently on board the station today, with many of the crew members taking up their day with some cleaning and replacement activities on many of the station's systems, starting with Commander Burbank, who's working with Andre Kuipers in the cabin fan assembly and ventilation ducts, continuing some work that started yesterday. In addition to assisting Kuipers with these activities, Commander Burbank will also be working on the atmosphere revitalization bacteria filters, cleaning those out in all of the U.S. modules, as well as taking a few samples in the Node 3 for eventual return to the ground. Russian cosmonaut Anton Shkaplerov is working on the TVIS system, or the treadmill vibration isolation and stabilization. He will be replacing one of the chassis on board. And then in addition to these activities, he'll be transferring some fluids into the Progress 46 water tanks and then flushing out some of the lines connecting those tanks. Fellow Russian cosmonaut Anatoly Ivanishin will be doing some dust filter change out in the Zvezda service module on the Russian segment, as well as collecting some air samples in both Zvezda and the Zarya modules. He'll also be doing some cargo transfer work from the Progress 46 spacecraft that docked, as well as doing the Signer experiment, which has the astronauts make ocean observations and help researchers on the ground investigate and find some of the most bioproductive water areas around the globe. The third Russian cosmonaut, Oleg started his day very early on with the Sprut-2 investigation, which helps to research the adaptation mechanisms of the human body and the impact of zero gravity on how well these astronauts stay hydrated. He'll also be doing some cleaning work, working on the fan screens in the Mini Research Module 1 or Rosviet, before moving on to replace some lights and light panel fuses across the Russian segment. European Space Agency astronaut Andrei Kuipers, as mentioned, is in day 2 of working on that cabin fan assembly and ventilation duct system inside of the Columbus module. He will be spending the bulk of his day working on this and then doing some cleanup and stow activities once he's completed those. And then finally, NASA astronaut Don Pettit is working again with the capillary flow experiment. These are a suite of different fluid experiments on board the station that investigate capillary flows of fluids through various containers. This research is hoping to improve current models used here on the ground that are used by designers of different low-gravity fluid systems, most commonly used in spacecraft, and will have vast future implications. He will also be taking some samples for the Human Research Facility, collecting biological samples such as crew urine that helps to research again the microgravity environment on board the station and its effects on the human body over extended periods of time. After all this, the crew will have a daily planning conference at the end of the day where they'll recap everything before moving into their scheduled sleep period of 3:30 p.m. Central Time.
This is Mission Control Houston. A very busy day on board the International Space Station as the crew on board, Commander Dan Burbank, fellow NASA astronaut Don Pettit, European Space Agency astronaut Andrei Kuipers, and Russian cosmonauts Anton Shkaplerov, Anatoly Ivanishin, and Oleg Kononenko continue their work. Today's activities focusing on a variety of different experiment and maintenance tasks aboard the orbiting outpost. It's currently at an altitude of 240 statute miles on a southeasterly track over Southeast Asia, heading for a crossing over the central portion of Australia on this orbit. Here in the Christopher C. Kraft Jr. Mission Control Center in Houston, Chris Edelin is the flight director on console in charge of the team. He's got Josh Matthew available to talk with the crew on any number of different activities that the crew might have questions or need information on. And he's also got communication with flight control rooms around the world in Europe, Russia, and Japan, where they are helping to manage the experiment activities aboard the multinational research outpost. Today, another busy day as the crew is focusing primarily on the SLICE experiment, which is an experiment that looks at combustion and with research activities into how the human body reacts to microgravity. Dan Burbank also conducting some maintenance on the space station's food warmer device and installing a couple of joint space station local area network power and data cables into the Harmony module that'll help collect it to the European Space Agency provided Columbus module. Don Pettit, again, working with the SLICE operations, and Andrei Kuipers is taking photographs of the evaluation and monitoring of biofilms inside ISS, or the viable payload. He's also doing some maintenance on the waste recovery system. This is some live video of the combustion experiment that's going on right now, the SLICE experiment. For more information about that, you can go to www.nasa.gov/slice. or www.nasa.gov/station. Just to recap the week, again, it's been a very busy week. On board Monday, the crew worked with some maintenance activities. They did a replacement on the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. It's one of the ropes that's used in the different exercises that they perform. They also had a downlink for the NASA Future Forum honoring the 50th anniversary of astronaut John Glenn's first American orbits of the Earth. On Tuesday, they worked with a variety of different experiments. One of those, the Sprint experiment. They also did some cleaning in the Leonardo Permanent Multipurpose Module. They worked with the microgravity small payload rack combustion chamber, preparing it for some samples. On Wednesday, they had an educational event with a consortium of schools in New Jersey. And they did a lot of ventilation system maintenance in the Columbus module, checking all of those ventilation systems to make sure that they're providing good airflow. Here's some video of Dan Burbank, who worked on that with Andrei Kuipers in particular, as they checked all of the seals and the fans and the ventilation system ducts that are used to circulate air throughout the space station, making sure in this case that those in the Columbus module are working very well. Very important for the crew to have good air circulation so that they don't have carbon dioxide bubbles form around their heads, which could be a health hazard for them. They also had some EVA tool stowage activities. Dan Burbank stowed the American pieces that were used by his Russian cosmonauts as they went out the previous week on a spacewalk to move a large cargo boom on the outside of the Pirs docking compartment to another docking compartment outside the station. And the crew also worked on the capillary flow experiment. This particular experiment portion was the vein experiment, where they look at how fluids flow in unusually shaped containers with the goal to be able to improve our understanding in the mathematical models that are used to build, in particular, tanks that are used to hold fluids for rocket engines that are used in space, as microgravity fluids flow differently. This is some video of some of the documentation of that capillary flow experiment vein system overview that occurred. On Thursday, it was work with the atmosphere revitalization bacteria filter. They did some cleaning on that, and Don Pettit did some additional work with the capillary flow experiment. And that brings us up to date for this week. The crew is going to have an easy weekend, just some routine maintenance activities and some time off to rest and relax before they get back to their full work week of experiment activities later on next week.
The Kennedy Space Center hosted several events to celebrate 50 years of Americans in orbit.
Roger, the clock is operating. We're underway. Loud and clear. Roger, we're programming and roll okay.
John Glenn, the first to achieve the goal, made his 3-orbit flight in Friendship 7 on February 20th, 1962.
It's been 50 years. It's hard for me to believe that. It seems like just a couple of weeks ago to me.
3 months later, fellow Mercury astronaut Scott Carpenter followed Glenn with his flight aboard Aurora 7 on May 24th, 1962. Glenn and Carpenter spoke to employees and met with news media, sharing stories about their adventures. The pair also participated in On the Shoulders of Giants, a ceremony honoring all who made NASA's Project Mercury possible. Senator Glenn also took advantage of an opportunity to sit inside Orbiter Discovery with Senate Director Bob Cabana. Glenn flew on Discovery when he returned to space in October 1998 as a payload specialist aboard Discovery's STS-95 mission.
And liftoff of Discovery with a crew of 6 astronaut heroes and 1 American legend.
50 years ago today, Friendship 7 was orbiting planet Earth, and that helped in a very big way pave the way for America to become a space power and to go to the moon and to do the things that we're doing right now on the International Space Station.
An in-flight call during the NASA Future Forum at The Ohio State University provided an opportunity for the International Space Station crew to congratulate Glenn on the anniversary of his historic flight. and for the senator, a big proponent of the ISS, to hear firsthand about life on board the orbiting outpost.
I don't know whether you know the exact number of research experiments you have on board right now. Do you have any idea of how many are on board?
We have well over 100, and they all come with an acronym that you either have no vowels in them, so it makes it really hard to pronounce. We've got a whole ensemble of life science experiments that basically probe the gravity knob for life, since it evolved on Earth under constant gravity, and now all of a sudden we can change the magnitude of gravity by a factor of 1,000,000.
And for what may be the first question Glenn has been asked from space, the crew wanted to know,
did you ever really find out what the fireflies were on your first orbit?
Yeah, we did. I think Scott Carpenter on the second flight was able to hit the side of the spacecraft, the capsule, and send a whole shower of them out. And the scientists working on this, they could relate them to the water dripping out through the heat exchanger. And then they just collected in a large cloud around the spacecraft.
With the 2013 budget rollout complete, NASA Administrator Charles Bolden and Deputy Administrator Lori Garver are making the rounds to NASA field centers. Following an all-hands meeting to discuss the budget with employees at the Goddard Space Flight Center, Bolden received a progress update on the James Webb Space Telescope. He also met with employees at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Garver spoke with employees at several other centers about the 2013 budget. At Stennis Space Center, she was joined by Stennis Deputy Director Rick Gilbrecht and by Center Director Mike Coates at the Johnson Space Center. She also toured several facilities at Langley Research Center with Director Lisa Rowe. NASA's budget request supports an ambitious program of space exploration that will build on new technologies and proven capabilities to expand America's reach into the solar system. New images from NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter spacecraft show the moon's crust is being stretched, forming minute valleys in a few small areas of the lunar surface. Scientists propose this geologic activity occurred less than 50 million years ago. That's recent considering the moon is more than 4.5 billion years old. The high-resolution images show small, narrow trenches, typically much longer than they are wide. This indicates the lunar crust is being pulled apart at these locations. LRO is managed by the Goddard Space Flight Center.
In February of 2011, NASA astronaut Al Drew was floating in space, having just finished his first spacewalk.
That was awesome. Oh man, that was great. The views were outstanding.
Flash forward a year, Drew was back on the ground at the Virginia Air and Space Center in Hampton, Virginia, helping NASA's Langley Research Center and the community celebrate Black History Month.
And what's your name, young lady?
Drew flew on the Space Shuttle Discovery's last mission. But just because NASA is moving forward from the shuttle program doesn't mean astronauts' jobs are over.
Astronauts are busier than ever right now. Although the shuttle program wound down last July, we continue, as we have been for years, flying to the International Space Station, although strictly on the Russian Soyuz rockets. We're engaged heavily with the commercial space operators right now, all these prospective folks who want to be taxis and rental cars for us, to help them to design their cockpits, design their operations plans.
The Hampton event highlighted cockpits and other parts of two kinds of vehicles, rockets to race cars, and NASA's contributions to both. Visitors participated in hands-on activities that explored some of the similarities, like aerodynamics and propulsion. Kids and adults also had the chance to chat with an original member of the country's first all-black aerial combat unit, the Tuskegee Airmen.
It was sort of a test. They thought that and intended for it to fail. But our commander, he insisted that we learn the job and do it well.
That was one message the astronaut and aviators passed on to youngsters. Get the education to do the job well, and they may someday rocket into history.
Is that cool?
3, 2, 1, and
Liftoff of Space Shuttle Columbia to broaden our view of the universe through the Hubble Space Telescope.
10 years ago, on March 1st, 2002, Space Shuttle Columbia launched on the 4th Hubble Space Telescope servicing mission.
Roger, roll, Columbia.
Commander Scott Altman, pilot Dwayne Carey, payload commander John Grunsfeld, and mission specialists Nancy Curry, James Newman, Richard Linehan, and Mike Massimino flew on the 11-day mission, during which 5 spacewalks were made to outfit Hubble with new equipment, including the advanced camera for surveys, new solar arrays, a new power control unit, and an experimental cooling system for NICMOS, the near-infrared camera and multi-object spectrometer.
Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station update. We're joining the International Space Station Flight Control Team and the Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Mission Control Center in Houston, where the Orbit 2 team is on console at this time, and they're led today by Flight Director David Korth. You can see here in the blue shirt with Josh Matthew in the Capcom seat next to him. On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 30 crew has been awake since midnight Central Time, and they are now more than halfway through their day. U.S. Commander Dan Burbank and U.S. Flight Engineer Don Pettit, as well as European Flight Engineer Andrei Kuipers and Russian Flight Engineers Anton Shkaplerov and Anatoly Ivanishin and Oleg Kononenko, are currently orbiting 237 miles above the coast of England, just about to pass over Bristol and London in the next few minutes. And then we'll be crossing over to the Netherlands, where Kuipers is from. Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishin launched to the station in their Russian Soyuz TMA-22 vehicle on November 13th and docked to the space station on November 15th. So they're working on their 106th day in space and their 104th day at the space station. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit followed them into space in their Soyuz TMA-03M on December 21st and arrived at the space station on December 23rd. They're now working on their 69th day in space and their 67th at the space station. Both halves of the crew still have a good deal of time left in their stay. Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishin are scheduled to leave in April, and Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit aren't coming home until July. But Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishin did spend some time in their Soyuz TMA-22 today as part of an emergency egress drill the crew is required to participate in periodically. In particular, this drill is called for sometime in the 12 to 14-week range of their stay at the station. In addition to that work, the Russian members of the crew spent a good deal of their time today unloading the Progress 46, which arrived at the station on January 27th, carrying just under 3 tons of food, fuel, and equipment, including 2,778 pounds of spare parts and experiment hardware. And as usual, there's plenty of scientific work going on board the station today. In particular, Don Pettit has been working on 2 experiments, the SLICE experiment and the BCAT-6 experiment. SLICE stands for Structure and Liftoff and Combustion Experiment, and that's aimed at improving the computer models of flames using unique data that can't be obtained on Earth. That is only available in microgravity. And the BCAT-6 is the Binary Colloidal Alloy Test number 6, and it looks at the molecules of a new type of liquid crystals that can rotate the polarization of light. That's what's going on in space today, and this is Mission Control Houston. Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station update. On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 30 crew has been awake since midnight Central Time, and they are now more than halfway through their day. U.S. Commander Dan Burbank and U.S. Flight Engineer Don Pettit, as well as European Flight Engineer Andrei Kuipers, and Russian Flight Engineers Oleg Kononenko, Anton Shkaplerov, and Anatoly Ivanishin, are currently orbiting 259 miles above the South Pacific Ocean, heading towards Central America. Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishin launched to the station in their Russian Soyuz TMA-22 vehicle on November 13th and docked to the space station on November 15th. So they're working on their 107th day in space and their 105th day at the space station. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit followed them into space in their Soyuz TMA-03M on December 21st and arrived at the station on December 23rd, so they're working on their 70th day in space and their 68th at the station. Both halves of the crew still have a good time left in their stay. Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn are scheduled to leave in April, and the others won't be coming home until July. But even so, however, preparations are being made for the departure of Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn. Reboost using the Zvezda service module thrusters. It's planned for 4:12 a.m. Central Time tomorrow to get the station in a good position for that undocking and a number of other activities, including the arrival of the next Progress and the 3 crew members that will take Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn's place. In space today, the work is focusing on maintenance and experiments. Flight Engineer Don Pettit is working on 2 experiments, the BCAT-6, or Binary Colloidal Alloy Test number 6 experiment, which looks at how liquids and gases separate without gravity's interference and how that separation forms structures. And he's working also with the Capillary Flow Experiment 2, which studies how gravity affects the movement of liquids in space. Commander Dan Burbank, meanwhile, is focused today on an upgrade of some of the station's computers. That upgrade involves the installation of several new processors called Enhanced Processor and Integrated Communications, or EPIC version. You can see some of what he's working on here. Flight Engineer Andrei Kuipers is also working with station computers today, and on the Russian side of the station, Anton Shkaplerov and Anatoly Ivanishyn are unpacking Progress 46, which arrived at the station on January 27th, carrying just under 3 tons of food, fuel, and equipment, including 2,778 pounds of spare parts and experiment hardware. Good morning and welcome to Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Update. We're joining the International Space Station Flight Control team on Leap Day here in the Space Station Flight Control Room at the Mission Control Center in Houston. The Orbit 2 team is on console at this time, and they're led by Flight Director Paul Dye with Jeremy Hansen in the Capcom seat. You can see Dye here in the white shirt next to Hansen in the blue shirt. On board the International Space Station, the Expedition 30 crew has been awake since midnight Central Time, and they're now more than halfway through their day. They are U.S. Commander Dan Burbank and U.S. Flight Engineer Don Pettit, European Flight Engineer Andrei Kuipers, and Russian Flight Engineers Oleg Kononenko, Anton Shkaplerov, and Anatoly Ivanishyn. Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn launched the station in their Russian Soyuz TMA-22 vehicle on November 13th and docked to the space station on November 15th. So they're working on their 108th day in space and their 106th day at the space station. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit followed them into space in their Soyuz TMA-03M on December 21st and arrived at the station on December 23rd. So they're working on their 71st day in space and their 69th day at the space station. Crew is currently 238 miles above the Indian Sea, just off the coast of India, heading southeast towards the coast of Australia. Their average altitude is a little higher today than it was yesterday, thanks to a successful reboost performed earlier this morning. Even though there's plenty of time left in both segments of the crew's stay, there's work going on now to get ready for their departure. To get into the correct position for the undocking of Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn's Soyuz, the Zvezda module's thrusters were fired earlier this morning for 1 minute and 16 seconds at 4:12 a.m. Central Time. That increased the station's altitude to 254 by 232 miles. Besides the Soyuz undocking, that also puts the station in a good place for the arrival of the next Progress and the 3 crew members that will take Burbank, Shkaplerov, and Ivanishyn's place in their Soyuz. That is Joe Akaba, Gennady Padalka, and Sergei Revin. You can see here. They're scheduled to launch in May in their Soyuz TMA-04M, which has actually just arrived in Baikonur, Kazakhstan for its final testing on Monday. We have a photo of that arrival at the Baikonur Cosmodrome to show you. That again was taken on Monday in Baikonur, Kazakhstan. Of course, there's still plenty of work to be done in the meantime. Today the crew had a large variety of experiments and maintenance going on. Commander Dan Burbank was again working on the ongoing update of the station's computers with the Enhanced Processor and Integrated Communications, or EPIC as it's called. Flight Engineer Don Pettit is in the process of actually performing the checkout of the station's combustion chamber that he spent time yesterday getting ready for. That facility is used for microgravity research on droplet, solid fuel, or gaseous fuel combustion. He also did a camera checkout for the BCAT-6, or Binary Colloidal Alloy Test Number 6, which looks at how liquids and gases interact with each other in mixtures in microgravity. Meanwhile, Flight Engineer Andre Kuipers did some work with the Cubic 3 experiment. Cubic is a small temperature-controlled incubator, or cooler, with removable inserts designed for self-contained automatic microgravity experiments with seeds, cells, and small animals. On the Russian side of the station, there are several other experiments in work. Anton Shkaplerov worked with the topologia study, which looks to identify objectives that can be used to assess the mental state of crew members during long-term space flights. Anatoly Ivanishin worked with both the identification and Matryoshka experiments. First of those looks at how dynamic events such as today's reboost affect the structure of the space station, and the other looks at the radiation levels inside of the space station. And Oleg Kononenko spent some time on the bar experiment today, which is meant to assess methods for detecting loss of pressure inside the space station. So that's what's going on in space today, and this is Mission Control Houston.